My name's Nicole Riley. I'm the Virginia State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business, and I serve as the chairperson for VPAP for the Board of Directors. So on behalf of our board and our staff, we just want to thank all of you for coming out this evening to hear more about the effects and what happened this past election cycle and how that might influence us moving forward. So again, thank you so much for being here. For VPAP, as we know, in this political environment, everyone is getting all kinds of information from all different types of sources. And so VPAP, we pride ourselves on being a reliable, nonpartisan source of information in Virginia politics. And so we hope all of you take advantage of VPAP throughout the year, whether it's our data visualizations, looking up donor history, whether it's looking up legislation as the General Assembly convenes here in the next couple months. We certainly are VA News. We hope that you're subscribing and using the services that we provide. At this time, I want to thank our sponsors for this evening. Our presenting sponsor, Cox Communications. We want to thank them for their continued support of VPAP, but specifically for this event. We have now, this is now our 7th year, so we certainly want to thank them. We also want to thank Inova Health for their support and sponsorship of our VIP reception that we had a few moments ago. But I would be remiss if I did not thank our partner and the leadership that we have gotten from Dr. Mark Rozelle here at the Schar School of Government and Policy at George Mason. This, I believe, is the 7th year that we have partnered with them, and they have been a huge support for VPAP in getting the mission out and making folks here in the Northern Virginia community aware of VPAP and what we do and the services that we provide. So again, thank you so much for hosting us and being a part of this program. We really appreciate it. And then we also want to thank a number of sponsors and patrons that we have from the Northern Virginia business community. We want to thank the Apartment and Office Building Association, Mercer Trigiani, Micron Technology, Northern Virginia Association of Realtors, the Northern Virginia Electric Cooperative, Virginia Association of Commercial Real Estate, Volkswagen of America, Comstock Companies, the Northern Virginia Technology Council, and Washington Gas. So we thank them for their support as well. And now to kind of get on with our program, it's my pleasure to introduce Neka Chazar, who's Cox Communications Regional Vice President for Government and Community Affairs. And again, we want to thank them for being our presenting sponsor for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Neka Chazar. I'll make it real simple for you. My friends call me Neck, and I believe I'm in a community of friends. And I'm the Vice President of Public and Government Affairs for Cox Communications. I'm really excited to be here today. And so question, did we have like some of the most exciting races in Virginia last week or what? Right? But before we get into the races, which I know our esteemed colleagues here are going to discuss with us, I'd like to share with you a little bit about Cox. And so on behalf of our 2,400 employees statewide, I would like to thank VPAP for making this evening possible and for the great work they did election night, providing real-time insights into the data and all the material that was used by all of us to make decisions. Analysis of voting results, data analytics, cool visualizations. It was just terrific. So David Poole, Rick Arenstein, and the VPAP team, thank you. Now, Cox, like all businesses, expects a level playing field from government, and VPAP is a valuable partner in ensuring that we do have a level playing field with government by promoting openness and transparency in the Commonwealth. But most importantly, VPAP is a valuable member and partner in our society in ensuring that we have a democracy. So, and as part of ensuring that we have a democracy, VPAP is instrumental in ensuring that we have an informed electorate, which is key to a democracy and dear to those of us at Cox. You see, Cox got its start as a small newspaper founded by James M. Cox 120 years ago. Similar to David Poole and the VPAP team, Mr. Cox was really passionate about openness, transparency, and democracy. His passion won him the 1920 Democratic National Convention nomination for the presidency of the United States, with Franklin D. Roosevelt as vice president. Now, clearly, I'm here today because he lost. And some say he lost because the country was still angry with President Woodrow Wilson, also a Democrat, over World War I. I say Mr. Cox lost because he didn't have cool data analytics similar to what we enjoy through VPAP today. But seriously, David Poole, Rick Arenstein, and others at VPAP do an outstanding job distilling complex information into digestible and accessible pieces in a digital format that all can share and enjoy. And as a provider of digital infrastructure in Virginia, it's critical for us at Cox to understand the political climate so that we can best support Virginia's plans to grow and to once again be the #1 state for business in the country. And if you think we at Cox are the only ones who have a dream for Virginia, I urge you to look at today's announcement made by Amazon, where it selected Northern Virginia, Crystal City, for its second headquarters. We have a hashtag at Cox, which I'd share with all of you, which is Virginia is for winners. Clearly, Jeff Bezos got that memo. Virginia is for winners. And in terms of winning, as we head into 2019, when all 140 seats in the General Assembly are going to be on the ballot, VPAP's work will remain critical to ensuring that we win when it comes to transparency throughout Virginia politics. And so by supporting VPAP through events like what we have tonight, through small donations and any other means, we at Cox and everyone in this room is ensuring that we inform our electorate to be the best that they can be, to be informed as they can be, and so that we can all support democracy in moving ourselves forward, in moving the Commonwealth forward, and in moving society forward. And so with that, I ask that you please join those of us at Cox in continuing to ensure support for VPAP and the programs that help to move all of us forward. Thank you so much, VPAP, for all that you do.
Thank you, NECA, for those kind remarks. And I'm David Poole. I'm the Executive Director of VPAP. And I'm going to just spend a couple minutes here running through a deck of slides, a short deck of slides, just to kind of give us all kind of a basis of understanding. I think everyone here follows the elections pretty closely. But let's just, it's a nice refresher, and then that will set the stage for our panel. So the big question, of course, was going to be voter turnout. What would the turnout be? And it turned out to be a pretty significant increase in turnout from what we've seen in recent years. It did not really touch the presidential levels, but you know, which was 72% in 2016, but it almost got to 60. The highest turnout was 65% in Congressional District 10. The Senate race, this is a slide showing spending by week in broadcast TV buys in the state's 4 biggest markets. This kind of tells you what kind of campaign it was in terms of the one-sided, in terms of Tim Kaine, the Democrat incumbent, getting his message out, where Corey Stewart just didn't have the resources and the party behind him. In the end, Corey Stewart got 41%. That was the lowest turnout, the lowest received by a GOP statewide candidate since 2008. This next map is, this is the map of Virginia resized. Every locality is sized according to its number of registered voters. You can see it stretches things out. Fairfax County kind of goes all the way out to Stanton. Chesterfield County is down around Danville. And Pittsylvania County, which is the largest geographic county in the world, in Virginia, is pushed down around Galax. So this shows you the power of the urban dense areas in Northern Virginia and their blue hue. and compared to Ralph Northam last year, Tim Kaine spread the field or expanded the field of Democratic carried localities. 10 localities went Democratic that had gone Republican in 2017. 2 of them included Stafford and Caroline County, kind of in the fast-growing I-95 corridor. This kind of red area here to the right, 2 of those went blue in this election. This is a showing of how every precinct, how the vote was compared in 2016 and 18. You can see everything was moving in one direction pretty much, other than down. There was a cluster down in Southside Virginia, which was part of the 5th Congressional District, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And finally, every GOP House candidate outperformed Corey Stewart at the top of the ticket, some by substantial amounts. And then lastly, a few slides here. Here we go. Just run through the districts. Just some quick summary numbers on money. Money's not everything in politics. There's a lot of people who spend more and end up losing, but it's a key number. So the money between the 2 candidates raised was about even, and actually toward the end, the TV broadcast money was about even in that race. And by contrast, in the Charlottesville 5th District race, the Democrat, Coburn, outraised the Republican, Riggleman. But if you see in the TV buys at the very end, thanks to the Paul Ryan Super PAC and the Club for Growth, Riggleman was able to outspend her down the stretch on TV. In Congressional District 2, again, the money, by the candidates at least, was even. But if you look at spending on TV, the outside groups, the party groups, the outside groups, gave a huge money advantage to Democrat Loria. And the last district we'll talk about tonight is the 7th Congressional District. Again, this is the money on this was very lopsided. Spanberger enjoyed a 2-to-1 margin and money raised by the candidates. And you can see that Bratt was spent, the incumbent Bratt was spent every week since Labor Day. So with those, it's my pleasure to turn over the podium to our partner for the last 7 years, Mark Rozell at the Schar School. Mark?
Is this mic hot? All right. I think I'm just going to go right to my seat and make it a little bit more informal here. I'm Mark Rozell. I serve as the Dean of the Schar School of Policy and Government here at George Mason University. So I welcome you to the Schar School and to this event with the Virginia Public Access Project. As my colleagues have said, we've been doing this together for 7 years, and I hope we will be doing this together for many more going forward. It is one of the events I really look forward to every year on the Schar School calendar. We are very committed to being a community partner, providing quality programming that provides opportunities for people in the Washington region to come learn about public policy, government, the political process, elections and campaigns. We have a lot of events here, candidate debates and forums, symposia, special speaker events, and the like. So take a look at the Schar School website, see what we have going on. Please come and join us. It's all free, and it's all for the community, and it's all for our purpose here to expand public knowledge and understanding of the political and governing process in the United States. Our donor, for whom we have named the school the Schar School, in many discussions I've had with him, has always said, make it nonpartisan, make it substantive, make it fact-based. Don't follow the trends of what's been going on in much of commentary and analysis in politics these days. And this is just the perfect event for, I think, having that kind of political discussion. We are fortunate to be able to do an event after the election to try to untangle what actually did happen, which is a lot more interesting and I think more substantive and better than trying to predict elections. And as I was saying at the reception, I'm sure glad this is not Florida. So, because we can actually say we have real election results and we can talk about what actually happened. So with that, I would like to invite the panelists to come up to the chairs here, and we're going to have a little discussion and open it up to questions for the audience soon. Karen Charles Dongo, campaign manager for Kane for Virginia. Karen. Okay. Either side is fine. We're not going to do that right-left thing. So, and Chris Jankowski, general consultant to the Scott Taylor for Congress campaign. Chris. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for coming.
Good to be here.
All right, so I think we ought to get to know you two first a little bit before we get into some of the questions about the campaign. And we're doing it a little bit different this year, by the way. Typically, we've had the statewide candidate campaign managers for both campaigns. We understood that a lot of the energy was really down-ticket in Virginia this year in the congressional races, where we had many really close and very competitive campaigns. So I think this is the appropriate forum for doing that. Karen, you may be the only Democratic campaign manager who ever earned a graduate degree from Regent University, Pat Robertson's university. You know, in this era of polarization, right, and you know, my side and your side, you're really unique. So I want you to tell us a little bit of how you ended up there and what you learned and how you all ended up in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, everybody, for having me. Regent was actually a really good experience. I think I was telling somebody the other day, it really is important to understand where the other side is coming from. And Regent really, really helped me learn that and understand it. It also helped me hone in my own beliefs and why I believed what I believe, why I was a Democrat, why I felt like our policies are better. You had to argue it. You had to speak up for yourself, and I definitely had to speak up for myself at Regent. And I think in the end, they came to appreciate my vocal stance. But I certainly appreciated that experience because more than anything, it has helped me craft the counter argument in a way. Particularly in a time like this where you do need moderate Democrats to come to your side, I feel like I know a little bit of the language. And so I must credit Regent for that.
That's great. Well, that's a message I want all my students to hear. I tell them when you're writing a paper, take the other side, right? And challenge yourself. Don't just reflect back what you think you already know and believe. So I really admire that. Thank you. Chris, your Twitter page describes you as down ballot state guy before it was cool. So tell us what you mean by that.
Well, it's still not cool.
Okay, I think it's cool.
But it's much more relevant than it's ever been. I think that when President Obama was preparing to leave office, he said he was going to focus on winning back state legislative seats. And I thought that was pretty neat. I started out in state government briefly in South Carolina. That's where I got involved in politics, although I'm from this area originally, and ended up just by chance, really, in focusing on state elections and down ballot races, and sort of just picked up. I believed, 20 years ago that they were just very important, and no one was paying attention. And it was honestly a lot easier to become, active in that area than try to fight it out here inside the Beltway on the Hill. I will say this: I think state government is really important. I think over here in the Hill, they spend years to pass anything, and then they spend years after they pass something arguing about what it's doing. In your average state capital, and I've been in almost all of them, they actually have to pass something, mostly because of the balanced budget issue in at least 36 states require that. And then when you do something at a state level, you kind of know what's happened about a year later. You can try to deny it or argue a little bit about it, but it's responsive, it's real, it's what we wish Washington was. But if you get enough states like the Republicans have, I feel like you can have an impact on the country, a national impact, one state at a time.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's get into the political climate. Last year, this event took place following an unexpected blue wave that nearly washed away the Republican supermajority in the Virginia House of Delegates. And from this particular stage, Ed Gillespie's campaign manager offered this advice for whoever would be running GOP campaigns in 2018. And his words were, good luck, because it's going to be a challenge. So let's talk about some of those fundamental challenges. First, women. 2018 began just like 2017 with women, all of them political novices, standing in line hoping to run for office. Democrats nominated women in the 4 most competitive House races. So Chris, talk to us a little bit about how Republicans responded to this challenge of women, both as candidates and the women vote, which has been, by all data, for a good many years, but it was really escalated in this campaign cycle, a challenge for Republicans, and particularly among college-educated suburban women.
Sure. Obviously, we saw in 2017 a shift. The gender gap got wider. I still think the story of 2017 was more about the young voters than the gender gap, but obviously that persisted into 18. The problem you had as a Republican running in 18 in Virginia is that the news cycle was driven by what's coming out of Washington, what the president's doing. Typically, that hasn't been real positive for trying to attract swing women voters to your candidate. I do think that each one of these congressional seats obviously had a different type of candidate, really, and a different district. But overall, we all struggled. And the numbers really didn't move from the beginning to the end with that demographic. I think that college-educated women are just not happy with the president. They're motivated in a way and engaged in a way that we haven't seen, and it's not in favor of Republicans.
Let me just jump on that a little bit. So how do you craft a message, though? I mean, how do you counter that? So the President of the United States is just the overriding figure in the Republican Party throughout the country right now. Do you advise candidates, separate yourself from the president as much as possible, create as much differentiation from him, or is the loss of your core base such a serious concern that you're kind of stuck in a place where you lose no matter what you do?
I think that's a false choice.
Okay.
I don't think you have to pick one side or the other. I do not believe that you can abandon President Trump and run as a Republican in the United States right now. He is popular with Republican voters. And the answer to your question is in 2nd District with Congressman Taylor. Our approach was we agreed with President Trump on some things. We disagreed on other things. For instance, in August, I guess, when the whole military parade thing came up, Congressman Taylor went on CNN about it. I talked to him before he went on. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, I don't think it's really a good idea. I don't think it's, we still have people serving. It's just a waste of money. We shouldn't do it." I was like, "Well, say that." So he went on CNN and said it. Not everyone was happy with that. On the other hand, he supported the president on a number of areas. So I think you have to kind of lay out where you are. The voters, you got to lay out where you are. I think voters don't like folks that are trying to make everyone happy. And what we were trying to do there was to say, this is the record. This is what we've done for the district. And there were some real things to talk about in just a one-term congressman. In Brat's case, he was trying to say, I'm still the same guy. I'm from the outside, and these are my issues. And, those issues at a point in time actually did do well with suburban voters, suburban women voters. But it's all was overtaken by Trump. And I think with Comstock, she is really the best that the Republican Party has had to offer in Northern Virginia for a while, and just a tireless fighter. And there, the gravity of politics, the numbers are just overwhelming for her. And we can, compare it to the 5th, where, the 5th seems to always come around to Republicans, and did this time as well.
Okay, thank you. Karen, were there any signs that the resist enthusiasm had crested during this election cycle?
Well, it definitely was a concern. I campaigned with a senator in 2017, and we saw the enthusiasm. We knew what was going to happen because it was overwhelming. But I do remember the conversation he and I had about whether this enthusiasm was going to last into 2018. And I think we had a similar problem, just the flip side of the coin. I think we also had a Trump problem in that it consumed all media attention. It consumed every story. So it didn't matter what the senator did. It didn't matter the new programs, what the vote was. It was just all Trump all the time. And we really did have to break through that. And one of the ways we did that, and we did that particularly for the down ballot, is to really make it about Virginia and try to remove the Trump factor as much as possible by zeroing in on what Virginians were thinking about, what Virginians were talking about, and tap into that energy. We definitely had to give our base and swing voters something to vote for. It could not just be against the president. And I think by the senator setting that example, the down ballot ticket on the Democratic side really followed suit in that as well.
Okay. Let me turn to the dramatic testimony in Justice Kavanaugh's nomination hearings. I'll let you go first on this one. Was this a significant turning point in either the Senate campaign or do you think in any of the 4 competitive House campaigns? How worried were you about this?
We were really worried after the vote, in particular. There's a trend among voters. Once something has passed, the mentality is that, well, it was good then. It must have been good. And we saw this particularly in the 7th, in the 2nd. There was definitely a momentum wall that we just hit in that moment. So after the vote. And that was a big point of concern. And I think the way we dealt with that, one, we had time on our side. So I think that was a positive. We had time to steer the ship again and turn it around. And then we went back to how we kicked off, bringing it back to Virginia, making it about Virginia. So rather than just talking about the national politics and what was going on nationally, every event on TV, on radio, on digital, Virginia was front and center. We made the issues, whether it was job and the economy, CTE, healthcare in particular, we changed the conversation back to the things that we knew both our base and swing voters were caring about and talking about. Because once the Kavanaugh vote passed, it was out of our hands and there was nothing that we can do about it. And it was really important to ensure that we didn't bleed out in that instance.
Okay. So liberals were pretty outraged, right? Although they've been outraged for 2 years, so that's, there you go. But how did the hearing stoke the Republican base? Was that something that your folks looked at and said, this is the opportunity, this is where we can really turn the momentum?
Well, I was working on the Kavanaugh confirmation as one of the consultants of the outside group, spending all those money on all those ads. And up to that moment, unless you were living in Alaska, North Dakota, Indiana, West Virginia, or Maine, it was a news story, but it wasn't the story. But in those states, we were spending a lot of money, both sides were spending a lot of money, and it was a ground war, air war type thing. What the end chapter of Kavanaugh did was make it a truly national political story. What it reminded me of, to answer your question, was in 2012 when I felt like Romney came out and really did well against Obama in that first debate, and we felt this surge. And it was getting really bad for Republicans at late September 2012, just environmentally. A lot of folks mistook that for momentum on the Republican side then. And all we were really doing was getting back some of what we'd lost in our base, and that's what Kavanaugh brought us. It brought our base back, particularly in those red states that ended up flipping in the U.S. Senate races. In Virginia, we saw the bump in our polling, but we saw it kind of fade back within, unfortunately, 10 days. It was going back to where we were. So I was proud of the efforts on Kavanaugh, but it was just a moment.
Okay.
A moment.
Let me turn to the economy. You got a great economy, an incumbent president, you got the tax cut, deregulation, right? Stock market soaring and soaring. Is Jim Carville wrong when he said it's the economy, stupid, that elections are just all about the economy? I mean, how do you have all those built-in advantages with a Republican president and lose so badly?
Well, I don't think we lost badly.
Yeah.
I thought,
A matter of interpretation.
Yeah. We lost.
Yeah.
And just by the way, I've watched this event for the last 7 years, and I always thought, man, that would be terrible to be the guy that on the losing side. Show up a week later, and guess what? A week later, it still hurts. I mean,
We're friendly.
so yeah, we're friendly. Look, it's just we are at a moment in this country where you got to ring the bell with both bases. The middle is getting smaller and smaller, and the tax package was net unpopular. The way it got branded, The economy is really going well. It's just the cultural issues, the suburban women. I almost want to say it's just not relevant. And the Taylor campaign, we did not give up on it. And one of our challenges, because of the unique circumstances of that race, was to change the topic back to ideology. And to do that, we talked about the economy under Pelosi when she was Speaker. Not entirely, academically and exercise, but, we saw, Pelosi, amazingly bad numbers. If they make her Speaker, thank you. Thank you. Among independents in the 2nd Congressional District, she's 57% unfavorable, like 29 favorable. I don't know. We had Newt Gingrich. They've got Pelosi. And so, to get to your point, we chipped away to the very end. Our last ad in the Taylor campaign was on jobs and things he'd done for the district. Brat was there for a week or two, and then switched to another message, maybe. It didn't really work anywhere in the country, I don't think.
Okay. Karen, how did the economic fundamentals work against Tim Kaine in some parts of Virginia? Was it a concern?
Well, we embrace the economy. He's a sitting senator. We touted that he had 17 pieces of legislation passed under this administration. We reached back and gave credit where credit was due, and to President Obama. And we made the very first ad was about career and technical jobs. We wanted to, again, Virginia, bringing career technical jobs to Virginia, particularly places in Virginia that weren't feeling the economic recovery as some other parts were feeling the economic recovery. So we talked about that. And it was a unique thing in particular for Democrats, not unique for Senator Kaine. He was very comfortable talking about it and embracing it, but it was a difference than some other Democrats normally would go straight to the social issues and not talk about the economy. But we really took on the economy and embraced the good economy. Again, it doesn't stop here. One of the taglines was one of his campaign slogan, "A Virginia that works for all." So we talked about this economic recovery needs to be for everyone, for every sector of Virginia, for every part of Virginia, Southwest, Northern Virginia, South Side. So that was really important for us to do because it helped move the conversation and the needle, and then we didn't have to shy away over, because who would want to shy away from a booming economy? You can't do that and expect to get anything done.
Was Trump kind of a gift to you in the sense that he closes the campaign talking about things other than the good economy? The caravan, and they're coming to get you, and all this stuff. You don't have to work so hard to rebut the message on the economy because they're not making the case.
Yeah, and I think that was important for us to embrace it initially. But interestingly enough, that caravan messaging really did scare a sector. It worked.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It absolutely, it worked. And fortunately for us, where our votes were coming from wasn't the sector, that were now really motivated based on the caravan in some aspects. But if you look at the numbers, the caravan messaging did do what it was intended to do. And I think for me, particularly for Democrats running in Virginia, you have to come out early with your message, especially when there's a factor you can't control. And you cannot, we knew earlier on we cannot control the president's messaging, nor how it'll invade Virginia. So we needed to come out early with our messaging. And because we were pounding our message from so early on, that's why the little, the bump that the caravan started to bring was, a little too late to really have an impact in our race.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add anything on the caravan, or should I go to the next topic? Did your internal show this was like a big mover, or?
Nothing moved big.
Yeah.
Everything was a game of inches. But I think that we just all have our anti-Trump, pro-Trump blinders on. Certainly the national media does. There was something about the idea of all those people, however many there were, heading to the border, and the sense of lawlessness and powerlessness And I think it was helping us with the soccer moms a little bit in the exurbs, not the inner suburbs. I sensed it. It was a good thing. I mean, I was sort of like, oh my gosh, but it was working. And it does go into the part of the immigration issue that does play well. And so, it did fade. And honestly, the slaughter, the murder in Pittsburgh, I mean, that was the end at that point. I mean, it was bad from that point forward, for the rest of the campaign.
So let me pick up on this. Corey Stewart, he's at the top of the ticket, right? And you have a challenge with really a lack of a unified effort on the Republican side, is what many of us sensed, right? That the candidates down ticket were not attaching themselves to the Republican senatorial nominee. How much did the lack of a joint effort affect the individual campaigns in the House races?
Well, we had, in the 2nd district, we got the same percentage of the vote as the 7th district, as Brat did, but we had to overcome a larger margin. We had to find more Kane-Taylor voters than Kane-Brat voters were needed. It wasn't helpful. It was such I feel like the Senate race didn't really exist until the end a little bit. I don't think it was, I would put it like on number 3 on the list of impactful things.
Okay.
Lost opportunity perhaps, but I don't think it was dispositive in any of the congressional races.
Okay. Let me turn to the TV ads.
Yeah.
Which ad on the Republican side did you think was the most effective?
Down ballot or
Either. Yeah.
there was a Taylor ad that brought in Nancy Pelosi and the message, the connection. I think it had Elaine fading into Nancy and Nancy fading into Elaine. And we all, in all honesty, we all looked at that ad and were like, oh, I need to call. That might hurt.
Okay.
That was the message was so clear, and the visuals reinforced that message. And again, this is a 2nd district, so this is a swing district. Normally, it's a ticket splitter district. Very comfortable historically. Will top of the ticket one party, down ballot the 2nd party without a problem. So that was something that concerned us, and we wanted to see what could be done. So I think that was an ad that we were concerned about.
Okay.
Just because of the region and the message that it was in.
Same question. Any ad that they did?
Spamberger ads were really good, and you could see her grow into it. These first-time candidates, their very first ad, you can just sense, you can see it, and she was growing into it and getting stronger and stronger, and was only going to close stronger. I felt like the ad where the narrator starts off, Dave Brat wasn't part of Washington, but he sure did. He looks the part, and he sure did learn quick. And that whole strategy from the very beginning of Spamberger was to redefine Brat as not what he was, and really base suppression. And that was the best closing. And I really think you should save your best messaging for later, and you just lay the groundwork. On the 2nd district, the ad with the women to camera on the pre-existing conditions was a headshot type ad. I mean, we saw that ad, and I'm like, oh. So we had to let it burn in a week, and then we found our survivors, cancer survivors, and we put our Virginia Beach local women on camera who said she's lying, and this is what Scott Taylor's position is on pre-existing conditions. And we did our best to push through, but that is not, you do not want to have a fight over health care with the Democrats if you're a Republican. I mean, the best you're doing is fighting it to a draw.
Speaking of messaging, for either of you, any independent expenditures that got in the way of the message that actually was counterproductive for your campaigns?
Not for us at all. Not that I don't recall seeing anything that really gave me some concern. And one thing, we were out early with our messaging. We wanted to own it. So we went up on ads and on digital in particular as well. So there isn't anything from the outside that made me cringe.
Okay. Chris?
Did you all see the shark ad? Anybody see that? NRCC put up an ad. I don't even remember. It had sharks. It was supposed to play off Virginia Beach.
Wow.
There's one theory that if you're talking about it, it's impactful. It got out of the rotation pretty quick. Not our ad. But,
Okay. So the audience has questions to propose, right? David, and they can send them up. Is that the, send them down to the end of the aisles? Okay, and then somebody will bring them up to me. But in the meantime, I'll just stick to the script until I start getting audience questions, and just bring them up anytime. So I want to get the audience involved in this too. So in the meantime, let's talk about some of the congressional races. And we'll start off with the 10th, since it's a good neighbor here. Loudoun County, Northern Fairfax County, over the Blue Ridge and into Winchester. Barbara Comstock, incumbent, 44%. Jennifer Wexton, 56%. Comstock distanced herself from Donald Trump and worked like a field hand on the campaign trail. Is there anything she could have done differently to change the outcome?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
There was a
race.
determination there.
Yeah.
I would point out that the primary results for Barbara were a harbinger. She has been in Northern Virginia in House Delegates and Congress, and you take on some baggage with the base, and that was a bad sign.
Yeah.
But it only got worse.
Nothing she could have done.
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It was just all baked in.
Jennifer Wexton she emerged really well from the primary, no damage from the primary. Everybody came together right afterward. And there was such a determination among the Democratic base in the 10th that there was nothing stopping
She
them.
was the best opponent Barbara's ever had at the worst possible time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was such a different context, right? Because Barbara won re-election in 2016 by a comfortable margin when that district was hugely lost by the top of the ticket, right? Hillary Clinton won that district by several percentage points. So there were a lot of split ticket voters in that district 2 years ago. But the dynamic this year was completely different.
And I would submit to you it had nothing to do with Barbara's performance in the last 2 years in Congress. They just said enough with Trump up here.
Okay. The federal pay raise. Just before Labor Day, the president announced he would cancel a scheduled pay raise for federal workers, and then he backed off. Was this the final blow?
For the 10th?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the final blow, but it was just, over the course of the campaign, because campaigns, it's a long, drawn out, sometimes there are lulls in between, but over the course, there would be something, particularly for the 10th, that would just re-energize an already overzealous, energized base. And this was just another thing that was just like, this is why we're gonna keep working, this is why we're gonna keep going. So the 10th was just, the energy coming out of the 10th was just incredible. It was unbelievable. Well,
what about canceling the pay raise and then backing off? I mean, for the other districts outside the 10th where we have so many federal employees, of course.
Not really.
Not much of an issue?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just another day in paradise.
Okay.
And I will say, our opponent tried to capitalize on this. Corey Stewart tried to, he disagreed with the president the first time. This was the first time in the campaign that he disagreed with the president, and then tried to take credit for the president backing off. And then tried to use messaging like, see, I'm already getting things done, and Tim Kaine hasn't. But of course, the senator just had like the longest sheet of things that we've done for federal employees, and that was easy. But he saw something there too that he was trying to capitalize on. It just didn't work.
Okay, let's turn to the 5th Congressional District, North Carolina line through Southside Virginia, through Charlottesville and north to the horse country of Fauquier County. Denver Riggleman, 53%, Leslie Cockburn, 47%. Tom Garrett departs in May, just before the primaries. The first-term congressman shocked everyone by announcing that he was struggling with alcoholism and would resign. Republicans quickly replaced him with Denver Riggleman, a distillery owner who had briefly run for a businessman. A businessman.
It's a nice place. You
It's
all
a-
need to go.
I heard, I've seen
really
it.
nice.
It does look nice, yeah.
Yeah.
So no free samples. So anyway, well, he made a name for himself, briefly ran for governor nomination, backed out the previous year. But I'm just going to ask, did this help or hurt the Republicans? The whole drama over the incumbent member dropping out and then Denver being the nominee. This is a real Republican district.
Yeah, I would say it gave Democrats hope, gave us a piece of hope. And I think that's why, we ran really hard and tried really hard. We put our best efforts forward, even though knowing that this is a red district. But it did give us hope. And I think, that's what we needed. We really, back to your earlier question about a united ticket, we really ran a coordinated campaign and a united ticket. And the ability to do so in every part of Virginia really helped in every part of Virginia. So not disregarding the 5th because it's hard helped us as we, tried, because it sent a message to our base all around, like, we're serious about this. We're not backing down. We're going everywhere. And so running that united front and really putting our best foot forward in the 5th was really important.
So let me ask, how much was Kane's campaign really about getting in there and trying to help those down-ticket candidates? I mean, a lot of people said, well, this guy won't take anything for granted after 2 years ago, but then a lot of other people said, with the opponent he had, he could afford to take things for granted and put a lot of big emphasis on the Democratic candidates in the 4 competitive districts.
I mean, our meetings were really about gaining House seats. We really focused intentionally about gaining House seats.
Okay.
He wanted that. He put that in front of me as a goal, as what he would count as a successful night. He said to me, he said, if I win and I don't get any House seats, I'm not going to really feel like this was successful.
Interesting.
And he said, if I win by 1 or 2, points, but I get House seats, I'm going to think it's a successful night. So from the very beginning, that was the goal. And so we were really intentional about it.
Okay. Chris, you want to add about the
The
5th district?
The 5th demographically favors the president. Even when Robert Hurt had the seat, it was always a little shaky, always closes strong for the Republican. Perriello briefly had the seat under different lines, slightly different lines. All the energy from the 5th was out of Charlottesville for the Democrats. It was real, and it was hard to measure, hard to poll that district, very hard to poll the district. And I give the CLF, the Congressional Leadership Fund, credit for getting in there. And they weren't always on the same page as the NRCC, and that's part of the story of 2018. But they did the right thing. They got in there, they shorted up, and they kept the seat.
Okay. So let's turn to the other 2 districts. Well, let me talk a little bit, though, about the sort of us versus them in rural Virginia. Riggleman and Democrat Leslie Cockburn could be called come heres, outsiders who moved to the area. Cockburn's messaging emphasized her former career as a TV journalist. Did this kind of play into GOP efforts to label her as an elitist?
I think so. I saw a lot of that. I think there was a lot of labeling her as an elitist, which was unfortunate. She really cared about the area. But if there is, many pundits will look back and they'll have all these lessons. I think my takeaway and what I would advise, particularly, Democrats running next year and the year after, is if you don't define yourself and your opponent first, it's going to get done for you. And it's so much harder to change a definition than to set it right the first time. So, and I think a little bit of that came into play there, is not being able to define herself first before she was defined.
And what about this sort of full-on resist message in that district?
Look,
Was it just not a good fit?
you could not make it you can't make it about Trump. Especially you can't be anti-Trump as a message. you had to be what you were for and what you were going to do. That was the way to thread the needle, particularly more so in the 5th and, than anywhere else.
Okay, good. Let me, before I go to the other districts, talk about how technology is changing campaigns. Last year at this event, one panelist declared Instagram is the new bumper sticker. Did you see a lessening of the importance of the traditional tools of political campaigns, broadcast TV, direct mail, direct contacting, person-to-person, retail politics? And if so, what's taking their place?
Well, the 2nd Congressional District is an amazingly efficient district in that it has one media market that's relatively inexpensive, covers every inch of the district. And so it is still a place where broadcast TV is where you want to be. And we didn't have enough money, but we had some, and the other side had more. We live in a society where everyone's walking around looking at their phone. And that's where you got to find voters, I think, online, very targeted. And the amount of data that we have now is alarming, and we use it. But you can't change the fundamentals. You're just trying. Everything's a game of inches. It's amazing the first poll in any race how decided everything is.
Yeah.
In the old days, you used to have 2 people in the upper 30s, and plenty of room to give. And now it's in the 40s, and you got this and that, very, very narrow. And just in general, I think that biography and who you are matters so much less than ever before. It's all about ideology and where you stand. You see the Democrats giving their candidates a pass, and the Republicans have certainly given our candidates a pass. As long as they're right on the issues, and I think that's troublesome. But to the technology, we had to survive in the Taylor campaign on a lot less money. And we did a lot of stuff online, a lot of stuff on the ground. And I was amazed how we held on. The difference in the money, if I can just say, it's not just about money. It's about that the Lauria campaign had a lot more money than us from July 1st to the finish line, like 3-to-1. And that money spends on a more cost-efficient way on TV. So the money looks even, but at any time in that campaign, from Labor Day on, we were outspent in message weight on TV, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, all the way through. And we held on. And I think we held on because Scott is a unique person who was well known, and we worked every other possible angle to just hold on. So TV, every election, less impactful, still the right, you gotta be there. If you're not there and they're there, you're dead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the technology has to be used strategically. And you have to remember that the technology is a means to an end, and that's speaking to your voters in a way that they'll receive the message. So the danger, particularly the time that we're in now, is that there is all sorts of new glitz and glitter and all sorts of technology out there. And it was really just going through and rejecting and saying, okay, this is a waste of money, this is a waste of time, this is not gonna get us votes, and really finding the ones. And how we did this was looking at the technology that got us what we ultimately wanted, and it's just to have a personal relationship with voters, to how to personalize that message. So the technology that it allowed us when the canvasser hit your door and you said, you know what, I don't know where Senator Kaine or Elaine Lauria stands on education. Before the day is over, yep, you're getting a text message with a video that says, "Hey, I just want to tell you where I stand on education." And then suddenly people are like, "Oh, they forgot that they saw a volunteer or a canvasser, and then they're saying like, oh, I had a encounter with the actual candidate." And so that's the kind of technology that you really want to invest in. And in doing it that way, it's just worth it. It really is.
Texting is where like the new thing, and it's because they have a peer-to-peer texting technology that is compliant with the law. Bernie Sanders started it and was very effective with it. Now everyone's using it. It'll burn out. But right now it's the way to, the new way to touch voters quickly.
Well, let's turn to the 2nd congressional district. Virginia Beach, Eastern Shore, portions of the peninsula, Scott Taylor, incumbent, first term, 49%. Elaine Luria, Democrat, wins 51%. And let's talk about the dirty tricks issue. There's a long tradition in Virginia politics of spoiler candidates, first of all. Think of Robert Sarvis, the Libertarian candidate for governor, 2013. Drained enough votes from the Republican nominee, Ken Cuccinelli, to possibly have made a difference and help elect Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat governor. Most famously, Attorney General Marshall Coleman, formerly ran as an independent in 1994, siphoning votes from the Republican nominee, Holly North, and Chuck Robb was reelected. And then finally, major party candidates quietly encouraged third party and independent candidates to qualify for the ballot. So everybody knows the value of having an independent candidate who can siphon votes away from their opponent. But rarely do these efforts come to light, and rarely are they accompanied by a criminal investigation. So how did the petition signature scandal involving first-term Congressman Scott Taylor change the dynamics of the 2nd District election?
Well, I was hired after that came to light, and the congressman made some changes. And I mean, I just have to say that.
Yes. You're clean. You're clean.
I believe my job on any campaign is to actually prevent things like that from happening. You know, and it's a very serious criminal matter. It's under investigation, and I can't really comment on that beyond that. But I will say this:
Well, just on the politics of it,
sort of
how did it play
dynamic.
with the voters
So what
and affect
happened?
the dynamics, not the legal stuff?
We had a never-ending press story, and the worst thing in any campaign is having a story you can't control, and you have no idea where it's going next. That's a very bad feeling. And then you take the story, and it's something anybody can understand. Anybody can understand a dead person signing a petition. Anybody gets that, all right? And it was just, you know, a bad 3 weeks in August, coupled with Luria went up positive, so she was unanswered positive, and we were just taking it in the teeth. And I think it did two things. It hurt our fundraising at a time when we really needed it. It made it very viable to the National Democrats. So DCC was coming in. They were coming in anyway. They had so much money. Eventually, they were going to be in, but they came in quick and heavy, and jumped us. We knew it was coming, but it still happens, and so that happened. And so what we did, we saw the race basically go to tide, you know, overnight, and it was hurting us. And so we had a strategy of shifting the debate back to the choice between two candidates, the ideology, and who was the best choice for the 2nd Congressional District. We were successful to an extent in that, but it never went away, and I believe that Congressman Taylor had nothing to do with it, and I believe the investigation will ultimately show that. It hurt him because his brand, he's a former SEAL, he's an amazing personal story, he's just a great person, and this hurt him because it just went against his brand. And it played right into what the National Dem playbook was, which was Republicans in Washington are corrupt, and they're going to take away your health care. We were going to take this, we were going to eat this one anyway, but it just had that patina, special prosecutor, and that's what the ads did. Now, I think they overplayed it. I do. They just overplayed it. The Dems just took that thing and overplayed it, and that kept us in the race. While we were massively outspent, they just would not let that thing go, and they kept overreaching on it. And I think people, just like people could understand it quickly in August, they could also move beyond it pretty quickly. And it kept us in the race.
Okay. Did you want to add on that topic? How important was that to the election outcome?
You know, honestly, when it first came out, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it in the sense of like that it would have an impact. Because when it first came out, one of the things about that story, it was a drip. It was a slow drip. So the first story was Scott Taylor helped Sean Brown get on the ballot. That's really no big deal, you know. And so we're just like, okay, let's keep working. This is not going to have any effect. I think then, you know, when another layer came out, like, oh, there was one dead person that signed the petition. And then it became two. And then, of course, things get blown out. And then, like, everybody on the petitions are dead. And, you know, so the continuousness of the story had an effect on Taylor, which, you know, one of the things I remember talking to the campaign team about is self-inflicted wounds are some of the worst. You can deal with somebody outside, throwing at you, and you could deal with that. But when it comes from the inside, those are really hard to overcome. And what we had to do, I do agree that perhaps, with national Democrats coming in and playing it and continue playing it, what we did in Virginia as a ticket on the ground is, again, turned it back on Virginia and showed like, look, this ticket, Kane and Elaine, I'm sure you're tired of hearing that. This is what we're gonna do. This is what this is about. Showing a positive was an opportunity, especially when you're running against a Navy SEAL. I think that is how we capitalized on that.
But you had a Navy veteran running against
Exactly.
a Navy SEAL.
Exactly. And so
How
it
important was
suddenly,
that?
that was huge.
Yeah.
That really was huge. And having a Navy veteran run against a Navy SEAL, and then just, showing her credentials, showing the senators what he has done, and linking those two together was really important.
Now, the data David was putting up before, 2-to-1 spending advantage in the last weeks of the campaign by
Right.
the Democratic
And
campaign.
even-
How key was that? I mean, a very close race.
Well, even beyond just dollar for dollar, we were overly funded from outside, and Loria had 2 different campaign messages up, 2 complete flights up. Plus, at one point, there were 6 different ads in the 2nd District against Taylor, almost all negative. And they always had 5 or 6 different ads. Our advantage was we had 1 ad each week for the Taylor campaign. We made the most of it. And the NRCC stuck with us and kept a nice, consistent, they had that ad with the blurring, which was really good and better than the shark. And CLF came in the end and dropped a bunch of money. But it's really important to understand the message weight, the fact that the outside groups have to pay an issue rate versus a candidate rate. And one of the weaknesses, we lost. We have to own that. I will always take a SEAL over anybody else. They are exceptional people and great leaders, great team people. Loria did not introduce herself enough. I really, if we were going to pull it out, and I thought we were not, I thought we were heading into a recount, and I'm sorry to see it slip away, but she never went to camera to the very, very end. She did some voiceover and some stuff, but she didn't exist enough. And I felt like, who cares? She won. But that was something we were hanging on to. Like, we had a very clear message with a lot less weight behind it. And I think it kept us in the race. We should have been dead way early. We had 5 campaign employees take the 5th Amendment.
Yeah.
You don't really learn how to handle that,
They don't teach you that in campaign school?
No, I never did campaign school. They didn't have those when I got in campaigns. I'm a former prosecutor for about 14 months, but I know enough about the law to know that is a problem. But we were in it, and even the New York Times poll, we were up. The last one, we were up 3. But if you read the tabs and you read what they did, the New York Times Siena poll, that was at 203,000 voters.
Wasn't it? Or?
No, his sample was great. It was the modeling. The modeling was for 203,000 voters, which was 171 cast in 2014. In 2017, there was 208,000. So they were going lower than 17. I didn't think, in running our numbers, that we could survive over 225. I thought we could hang up to 225. I'm pleased that we survived, came that close at 270. Still, as we were talking earlier, one of the lowest turnout districts in the state, for reasons that have to do with that district, I believe. We held on, and I think it was because Scott Taylor is an exceptional candidate, and I think that even on Election Day, even though we couldn't afford polling at the end, I suspect his image was not underwater, and I think Elaine's was probably close to that with the sample that we were modeling. And the difference in that race was the Kane Democrat turnout. It was brutal. I
Yeah.
mean, just watching, I had my own model. I did Jill Vogel's race and John Adams' race, and Vogel did well in that district, barely well. And so I had Jill's numbers, and I had my little cheat sheet, and we were just coming in just under.
And really, if you know, if Democrats take something away from this, it's that we have to increase our turnout in every race, and we knew that going in, and we looked for new voters, the first-time voters in 17, new folks who registered for the first time, registered to vote, and we also looked at who are the consistent presidential voters that we can convince to vote in this off-year election. And it's the combination of those three universes that really helped us pound out folks to come and vote. And particularly for the 2nd and the 7th, that was crucial to bring them through. It was really important to increase the amount of people we brought out.
Well, let me turn to the 7th then. That's a great segue. So the Richmond suburbs and north into Piedmont, Dave Bratt, incumbent, 48.4%. Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, Victor, 50.3%. Dave Bratt knew he had a problem with suburban women who, using his term, were all up in his grill. I'm still trying to figure that one out. How did his campaign respond to this challenge? Either of you.
Chris, you want to start?
I can go to the next question, but I'm too uncomfortable.
I live in the 7th, and I worked with Dave in 2016 during what was going to be a primary. So I know him, I like him. I think that he landed on the national scene in 2014, and there's something to be learned from working your way up, maybe being on school board, going up, whatever, because what you learn is sort of how to measure public opinion, how to have those town halls, how to handle all that. And I think that was a struggle for him. I mean, he was always the outsider, the one throwing punches, and whatever you want to use for metaphor. And he found himself on the defensive, and I don't think he handled it well and adjusted to it well personally. I think the moment in the jail in Chesterfield was tough. That was a moment. And Spanberger is good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
she's strong, and she got stronger.
Yep. And she has an outstanding story.
She has the
She
story.
has an outstanding story.
There's nothing wrong with the terrorist high thing. I defend that. I think I'm sure it was poll tested, it worked. It wasn't enough, and the problem was that Dave didn't have the money, so he held back, and he didn't get up there and on TV. And so all you had was the CLF basically controlling and defining that race. And they held it, We had, when I could see Dave was winning narrowly all the way through. At that turnout level, I mean, it wasn't going to happen. It's very interesting how close it was to me, given every advantage the Democrats had. And that's why I think, the 7th and the 2nd are going to be battlegrounds in 2 years for sure.
Dave Bratt kind of disappeared from view in the last stretch of the campaign. What was that all about? Was that a personal decision, a strategy, or
I think that's a little
was he
media
just
spin.
tired?
No, Dave, he was out there. I do think that he avoided the well-publicized events that tend to attract the resist crowd. And I'm not sure they're particularly helpful for anybody who attends. It's, some people get some things off their chest. I don't think he disappeared. I think he ran his grassroots type campaign that he knew to run. And, I think that at some point you have to give Spanberger credit for what she ran, the energy she ran with, the quality of candidate she is, and and Dave sort of finding himself in that completely hard to predict situation.
Yeah, she had a great story. She had a strategy as well. It wasn't, particularly for her district, it wasn't about being anti-Trump. It was about, this is what I'm going to do, bringing fresh energy. And then she just tapped into suburban women. Like, women saw themselves in her. people saw themselves in her.
The only
And-
time she mentioned President Trump in an ad was when she said she'd work with him.
Yeah.
And it was like October.
Yeah,
mean-
exactly. And that was, that's discipline, because the Democratic base will try to drag you there, but when you're in a district like hers, you have to be disciplined, and it was very disciplined. And look, I'm proud of. You'll hear this all the time because I'm proud of the coordination, even in our ads. Senator Kaine put up CTE, career technical ad, what jobs that's bringing. And then Abby Spanberger did the same thing. And that was, again, intentional in reinforcing the message. And so it gave people, I think, who normally would not look at a Democrat, now it's looking at like, oh, okay, I think I could do this. And, and that was important to do in that district.
Let me ask this. I looked historically at wave elections in Virginia in the past century, and there was a common pattern, right? When you had sort of an atypical sort of wave election where one party that sweeps into power and picks up seats that it normally wouldn't take. And the common pattern with all of these cases, with one exception, is giving them all up in the next election cycle. Yeah. So that's my question about the Democrats picking up these seats in Republican territory in an extraordinary turnout election cycle, which I think the turnout was the most for a midterm election going back to almost a half century. How the heck do you replicate that and keep those seats? And I'm excluding the 10th from this conversation.
I think it's important, and Chris and I were talking earlier, I will still contend Virginia is purple, and this is for this exact reason, because Democrats really have to work hard and intentionally to win in Virginia. It is not a cakewalk. It is not just, wake up in the morning and go. Our base and our voters, they want a relationship. They want you to talk to them all the time. They want you to send flowers. They want you to be there. They want you to show up everywhere because, God forbid you didn't show up somewhere and it's suddenly you've abandoned us. It's a lot of work and it's hard. Mm-hmm. And it's gonna be intentional in working hard again. What we cannot do as Democrats is say, okay, we won, we're good now, Virginia's blue, I don't have to do anything else again. And since Virginia has an election every year, it's like you take December, January off maybe, and then by February, March, you get back right in there because it's going to take work to do that. And I think you're right. I think the second just historically has been a ticket splitter anyway. And now the 7th is in play. It's going to take work to keep it.
Do you want to expand that, or maybe talk about 2019 and what the dynamics are going to look like given what happened this year? And does this year's election portend anything about how the Republicans should be competing next year in the state legislative elections?
A couple things. One, you cannot miss the obvious parallels between 2009, 2010, the Tea Party, and then what happened to what's happening right now. I mean, it just seems like both sides tend to get in and overreach. I think that, I have two clients in state senate, Siobhan Dunavant in suburban Richmond and Glenn Sturdivant. I'll be working on those races next year. And if I was one of them and I was out on the doors and someone now said something to me about, President Trump, what are you going to do about Trump? I would refer them to their newly elected Democratic Congresswoman and say, you should call her because I'm running for state senate and here's what I've done, here's what I want to do. And I think the fever's going to break. 2011 was not a great year for Republicans in Virginia. We scraped out the win in the Spotsylvania seat, but that was it. The rest of it was a wash, and it wasn't good in Louisiana and some other states I was doing work in. It just as soon as the Republicans had that gavel in the U.S. House, it was nothing but up for Obama, and I don't think it's going to be quite the same, but there's going to be a lessening of intensity. Now, you're not going to know it by looking at social media. I mean, the Democrat, they are organized and they resist, and they're going to be loud, but I don't know that you're going to see a third year in a row of a major change in voter behavior, which would be the largest change. We'll have higher turnout, but I think I think the Republicans are in a position to pick up House seats and the House delegates, depending on what set of maps. And the U.S. Supreme Court today agreed to hear that case. And then in the Senate, it's unfortunately all Republican defense. And I've been involved in picking up a few legislative chambers in the country, and you really don't want to be on defense as much as we are. So you have to, be ready. But I think that it will not be a repeat of 2018.
So Trump said this year, treat this election as though I'm on the ticket. Look how that went. But we don't have federal elections next year. Are the Democrats going to run campaigns against Trump in Virginia in local legislative races?
Look, I think the Democrats, I think we have a formula, and I think if people follow the formula, they'll win and pick up some seats. Make it about Virginia, make it local, and go everywhere in your district. Have those hard conversations, and I think you could still see that energy. If it's about what's happening, if you can't connect it for people, and one thing that I'll say, you also have to be able to say what you've done, if you've been in the position already, and what you intend to do. Like you have to give folks a reason. That's just consistent with Virginians. Virginians want to know why they should give you another opportunity. And I think there's a point in the debate that the senator said, Corey attacked him like, you haven't done anything in 6 years. And the senator says, actually, I have. First, I've got 17 pieces of legislation signed by this president. And then ticked off, what they were and what he did. And being able to do that was huge because it told voters, it doesn't matter who, there's no excuse. Getting things done no matter what. And I think that's where people are. They don't want to hear excuses. They don't want to hear, well, the president won't work with me, or this won't happen, or this didn't happen, well, I didn't get this majority or that majority. People just want to see results, and Virginians definitely want to see results, and you have to be able to deliver results.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to some audience questions here, and I do like to start off with this one. Is it possible for any candidate, regardless of local, county, state, national, to prevail in the current political environment with running a positive-only campaign? Go at it.
Well, most of you know Senator Kaine, Mr. Optimistic himself. We were positive, I would say. I mean, I'm curious to your opinion because, I'm sitting from here. I think we ran a positive campaign, but we also weren't afraid to take it to Corey when he was wrong on an issue or attacking the senator on an issue. We went right back on him about it. I think security was an area. Normally, Democrats might shy away from security, but the senator didn't shy away. We put up an ad about security. We put up an ad about 355 Navy. We put up an ad, talked about voting for comprehensive immigration reform, including funding for the wall that everybody's obsessed about. So we went into territory that I think Corey Stewart's campaign thought we wouldn't go to, and I think we really kept it positive. We did not attack personally. I think that's the difference. We did not insult him personally. We did not attack his family, though he attacked the senator's family. And I think that was a distinction. The distinction was about policy and who had a better vision for Virginia and not about personality and going there.
Can you win that way, running an entirely positive campaign in today's political environment?
Absolutely not. I mean, maybe if you're Nick Saban in Alabama, and you're one of these celebrity type people where people definitely know you and like you, I do believe that you have to run some positive campaign. My old saying was you can't beat something with nothing. And even in the wave year of 2010, we made sure that the candidates, the Republicans, had some image, some reason, there's some familiarity with the voters. You can beat something with nothing, but it's not a good strategy. It's a hope. On the Kaine campaign, I was just very impressed with when they went negative. They went, very credible attacks. They used Corey's voice, always good, to use your opponent's voice, saying things that are, very, a little taken out of context, but basically where he stood on an issue, and on the ports and the military and Hampton Roads and various things that he said, and ran those kind of issue-based attacks, and that's fair and that's smart, and that's one of the Democrats' advantages in Virginia, which is blue, by the way. But we can still win. But I mean, it's blue. Let's call it what it is. It's blue. I mean, I'm sorry your base is finicky, but they are doing a pretty good job.
You're in Arlington. This is like, they're,
Yeah.
they're all
Arlington is definitely blue. There's no doubt about that.
So next year we'll be down in Rockingham or
There we
something.
go. Road trip? I'm in.
You have two senators who did it the hard way. They won when it was red. I still am not sure what Mark Warner stands for or what version of him is there. But I know where Tim Kaine stands. He's been a progressive, unapologetic from the beginning, and but in a way, he sells it in a way that's smart. And I think that grounds the Democratic Party, having those two who did it back in the day when it was hard. And so I think Kaine ran a very smart race. I think at the end, I don't know if you all were subjected to Corey Stewart's radio blitzkrieg, but they loaded up on radio, and I drive a 2007 Camry. It just has a regular old radio in it, so I listen to FM, and I mean, it was just like 2 ads in the same block, 60 seconds, just Corey yelling, and obviously he has a connection that regular Republicans don't have, and we need to figure that out. But I almost felt like it was helping Kaine. Like what Kaine needed more than anything was someone to throw a punch at him. And that didn't really happen that much. But it worked out for you all anyway, so congratulations.
All right. Well, I'll tone these a little bit. So how does the GOP address some of the challenges it's having with women voters, young voters? The questioner is asking, does the GOP have any real plans to, sort of broaden its base and go after voting demographics that they're having a lot of trouble with? I mean, something's going on, right? You're losing the young voters. The gender gap is huge. Yeah.
I mean, Trump won through the Electoral College. Virginia is just the worst place to run that strategy. They clearly were winning Florida still, North Carolina. The Rust Belt's we've got to see what happens in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Ohio's gotten a little worse. So, I mean, we can't just write off something that clearly has some resonance. Unfortunately, I think campaigns in America are more and more about getting your base out. I mean, people have their jerseys on, red and blue, and it's harder and harder. So, my job is to help win elections, not fix America. And those are two totally different things. But I'm troubled by what's going on, and I think it's tough to watch my party work itself into a corner. I'm a conservative. I believe in conservative things, and I don't believe in nationalism, racism, bullying, culture wars. I believe in the Second Amendment. I'm an NRA member, and I didn't see Senator Kaine's gun control ad. Didn't see that. I think that we can win if we stick to conservative principles, and there's a way to talk about the immigration issue, and then there's a way not to talk about it. So, I mean, obviously we don't have enough time. You probably don't care what I think, but we're at a crossroads as a country, and Republicans, have a responsibility to, do a little better.
So the night before the election, I'm attending, because I wanted to be there for a very good reason, Tom Davis's class that he teaches on Virginia politics, and his guest speaker that day was 92 years old, John Warner. And night before the election, that was quite a treat for our students. And a lot of what you're saying, they were kind of lamenting what's been happening with the Republican Party. John Warner actually says in response to a question that he's not sure he'd run as a Republican today. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's a tough, I mean, I'm making the point because 20 years ago, right, the Republicans were really ascendant in this state. Things were just humming, right? They were winning statewide elections. They had control of the state legislature. You know, is there a way to get that back, I guess is what I'm getting at. You know, we all want a competitive two-party system. We want both parties to be strong. We don't, you know, we don't want a one-party dominated system, right? It's not good for the republic. You know, whether you're red or blue, right? Yeah.
Virginia is so sensitive to the national environment because of our proximity, and then we have our governor's race the year after our White House race. I mean, it is tough to overcome those things.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time down ballot trying to win attorney general races. Even when the top of the ticket goes a different way, you can do that still, you know. I you know, respect Senator Warner. I just don't think any of that's relevant anymore. You know, the whole let's come together in the middle, you know, Senator Warner can run as a Democrat. I don't really care. I mean, you know, this is what we believe in, and clearly the Republicans are over here on this. And I think that's a little bit of a media, you know, they love to hear about these Republicans who are coming out against Republicans. Well, they're not really Republicans anymore. And that's okay. But let's call it what it is. And, you know, we had this little battle 10 years ago in the state Senate. And it has sort of sorted itself out.
Okay.
And I think the factor
Please,
in Virginia as well is that the Democrats that have won have produced. So there are jobs, Medicaid expansion under this administration, but the McAuliffe administration, Senator Warner, Senator Kaine, they're consistently showing what they've done to move Virginia forward. And I think that's a key element because you could get entangled in all the social issues and the cultural issues. And even if you're on the right side of social issues and the cultural issues, if you're not showing what you have done to move people's lives forward, to make it better, it still doesn't matter. And I think that's what the Democrats who've won in Virginia and or continue to win in Virginia, that's the major difference. And I do think it's important to people that, you know, particularly like Senator Kaine in particular, is not trying to divide people on the basis of, you know, race, gender, socioeconomic. I do think that has been an important element and factor for people.
Okay. So one question from the audience, interesting, is whether the 2018 election cycle tells us anything about the status of redistricting reform and the possibility of putting an end to, as the person calls it, partisan gerrymandering. I'm reading from the question here. Is anything going to happen in time for the post-2020 redistricting process? Anybody?
I mean, look, there's a legal element that will get sorted. But I will say this. I think when districts are competitive, it's better for everybody. I really do believe that. I think having competitive districts, it brings in energy, it brings a buy-in, and it's important and it's better for everybody. So I do trending to a place where there are competitive districts will be a benefit to Virginia.
Do you want to jump in on that, Chris? Whether it's a good idea or bad idea, redistricting reform?
I have a little bit of experience in this area. I think that I'm in favor of redistricting reform if it's done in the state constitution, and it essentially gives a reviewing court objective criteria to apply to evaluate maps. You know, the Democrats have a disadvantage. They pack themselves into suburban and urban areas. And, you know, I think it's wrong to try to take a map and make it politically regressive just in the name of having, you know, more competitive races. You know, I'd like to say you have a right to vote, but you don't have a right to live in a competitive district. You know, and I mean, I think that's where the Supreme Court is too. If you did, how do you define that and how do you enforce it when people don't live in, only in Iowa do they live in perfectly square localities. And in Iowa, I mean, this Republicans there told me, well, Chris, we just, we get together with Democrats and we work it out. We draw our lines, we compromise. All right, they live in squares. And they also, back then, the demographics aren't nearly as diverse. That's changing in Iowa. But Virginia is just a tricky state to try to implement that reform. I would say, finally, the state Senate maps that we're running under were done by Democrats. And basically, the House Republicans did their plan. Right. Senate Dems did their plan. And so what's their complaint about? I
mean, I do think something needs to happen. I mean, some of these districts the lines just don't make any sense whatsoever. So I agree that something needs to happen. The details of how it happens, they're important because, we have a trust issue right now, particularly, Democrats don't trust Republicans, Republicans don't trust Democrats to do it fairly. There needs to be reform.
But, I mean, you almost got the House of Delegates last year. So, I mean,
yeah.
I felt like that was the biggest argument against this whole, oh my gosh, you've disenfranchised. Well, a lot of people re-enfranchise themselves.
Nevertheless,
and,
I agree. I agree that we worked, but nevertheless, I think reform is definitely necessary.
I'm fine with it.
It just doesn't make,
just
it
no
makes sense
commissions.
right now.
These commissions are bad news. Bad news. Because I'll tell you why. You are taking what the founders of this country recognized was an inherently political process and taking it out of the people who are the most political and putting it into an independent commission that there's no such thing. I mean, the ones that have true parity end up getting thrown to the courts anyway. And as a conservative, I am highly skeptical that the solution is to take our legislative body and have them abdicate their responsibility to a commission in any solution, but especially in this one. I believe that put in the state constitution, criteria that a state court can apply on compact and communities of interest and all that stuff, fine. But I've lived through a lot of this in a lot of states, like for instance, the Arizona Commission. Arizona State Senate, only 30 seats. Historically, it's been about 18 Republican seats. They drew maps that were, in the name of competitive, they were 15-15. We now have the majority barely, but that's politically regressive. That's not fair, But they'll tell you, well, we wanted to have as many competitive elections as possible.
I think the other factor too is we have to recognize that there have been communities that were disenfranchised previously. So we can't forget that part of it too. And I think that's why as we go forward and think about what reform looks like, we need to recognize there were several missteps that were made that disenfranchised people, and we need to go forward keeping that history in mind so that we don't repeat that again.
I agree.
Okay, so do you think, another question from the audience, that the anti-immigrant, anti-refugee national climate was a motivating factor in Democratic turnout, especially for minority voters, and was it a motivating factor for Republican turnout? So each of you.
I think it was another page into a book that Democrats didn't want to read anymore. I think the way the caravan, the way it was portrayed, the way immigrants were portrayed, particularly separating children at the border, was just another level of this is not who we want to be, and this is not the direction we want to go to. So I don't know if it was any motivating, but it certainly was evidence that if there isn't a turning around in this country, or if something isn't done to change the trajectory, the direction, it would not be good for any minority community. And I think communities of color recognize that. I think there was a recognition that it could be children at the border today. It could be my own children right here tomorrow. And I think that brought communities of color together as well. I don't think it was the motivating factor. I think it was just another layer of, you know, who are we as Americans, and not recognizing ourselves and wanting to recognize ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Can you tell me what the question exactly
Sure,
was?
sure. Do you think that the anti-immigrant, anti-refugee national climate was a motivating factor for Democratic turnout and also for Republican turnout? You can soften the question's edges a little bit,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
you know, you know, whether Trump's
Yeah.
sort of gambit at the end there did that ratchet up the Republican turnout?
There's
You know,
no question on the data would show that it is working with a segment of Republican voters. It does work, and there's a reason. I mean, but there's some legitimate discussion, and there's some things that just aren't appropriate or wrong. You know, I think that in terms of on the Democratic side, it was just another thing, check the box. I mean, it started with them with the travel ban, which turned out to be not that big a deal to most voters, but was, you know, put the Democrat base on fire, and it never went out. And this was, you know, that the border coverage was tough. It should have. You would have thought it would have just killed us, and it didn't. I mean. You know, I can tell you what I think, but no one really cares. But I'm just looking at the data, and it works. And that's where the national media and this bubble we live in is just not real. You know, I mean, I watch MSNBC all the time because I feel like I have to see what the other side is saying, especially during the Kavanaugh stuff. But it's all I watch until I can't take it anymore. And I turn it back on later. And they are just, they've lost their minds. They are unhinged. I mean, how many times does the sky fall, and then it doesn't fall? I'm not endorsing what is happening, but I think that, you know, the smart Democrats are doing what Kaine did. They're not making it about the president. They're focusing on issues. They're trying to broaden their appeal, if not suppress the GOP base a little bit. But that's fine. That's all fair. You know, but it does work, and it certainly works in other parts of America. I mean, we've gained seats in the U.S. Senate, and that didn't just happen.
And I think what drives Democrats crazy about that is it's a fear that doesn't exist. Like, there's no real threat here. And so I think nationally Democrats are struggling to how to respond. But it's like, how do you respond to a fear that somebody has that is just not real, that was fabricated in order to make you afraid? And that's a tough question to really contend with over and over again. So it's not just one issue, it's not one time. You're constantly having to contend with that.
so here's a short question. Any evidence of Russian interference in Virginia's elections? No? Okay.
I mean, clearly, we're not competent enough to even know. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. How do we define what makes a campaign or a message, quote unquote, dirty? How do we clean up the political process?
Well, my father tells people that I'm a piano player in the whorehouse. So, and that was back when I was just a lawyer. So, he really does say that. Yeah, so I'm not sure you're asking the right person. That's why. I will say this. I mean, if I can, this fact-checking stuff is got to stop. It is absurd, this political fact, because they're not checking facts. They're doing three things. Number one, they're investigating and trying to determine actual facts to report in a news article. Totally valid. Number two, they take those facts and they draw conclusions. All right, when we do an ad, I take facts, and then we draw conclusions, and we advocate for a conclusion. We want you to see this set of facts and conclude this. All right, this senator voted for the budget that did this, and then he voted the other way there, but then he did this. Nothing is clean, right? So you just have to take those facts, and then, so they've drawn conclusions. They're not checking facts. They're taking facts and drawing their conclusions. Then they have a rating system for their own conclusion, based on their own conclusion. All right, that's absurd. And I got to tell you, I've just had it. Like when we get those PolitiFact or any of those fact checker emails, I'm like, oh, I mean, they have to like talk me out of the tree because I just don't care. They can print anything they want. And many Pinocchios as you want. I don't care. It's absurd. And it's not the fact checker's fault, but the newspapers then take the rating system and put it below the fold front page. So instead of a story that says candidate Jones, claims are being disputed, and then lays out both sides in the story, you get liar, liar, pants on fire, Dave Brat. And that's all people see. They flip the paper over, they look at it, oh, Dave Brat's lying, That's not fair. That's not fair. The media has an obligation. They have amazing power, and I think they are poisoning the well, and they're making it. I don't believe in fake news, but I know why people believe in fake news, because you sit in America, and you see news after news after news that bears no bearing to the reality you live in, and it poisons the well. And I've just had it. So I thought I'd just share that with you all.
All right.
I really like
He was just
Chris.
on the couch, and I was, kind of helping him out there.
I really like Chris, but I have a completely opposite view on this. I think when your opponent is literally making stuff up, there needs to be an entity that says, you're making this up. And I think that's where we are.
It's called your campaign.
Well, I mean, then it gets like he said, she said, he said. But I think it's really important to start from the basis. I mean, there has to be a level of rules. We have to operate in truth. I agree that you can explain a vote. I agree that you can say why you voted, a certain way, and that part of it. But your opponent cannot make up a legislation that didn't exist, that you never voted for, and you not have an ability to say, that legislation you just made up, it doesn't exist, and I never voted for it. I think that's a problem, and I think that's where we are. The playing field is not fair if one side gets away with just making it up as they go, or any side, not just one side, but any side. You can't make it up as you go, and I think that's where the media can help and play. Of saying like, okay, this is made up and it's not real, and we have to point that out. So that's where I see the fact checks or having the media or an entity just to call out when something really is made up. It's not about stretching. It's when things are being fabricated, and that's a problem.
I think Chris is saying, too, that they're making themselves part of the political game, right, by passing judgments on,
I don't know if you're passing judgment if you're saying this is made up and this isn't made up. I think there's a difference. There's a difference when you're saying, if the media is saying, oh, the words were taken out of context. Mm-hmm. It's different when when an opponent uses your words out of context. Mm-hmm. It is a whole different level when your opponent makes up words you never said. I think, there's a difference here, and we can't gray out the difference. It has to be stark, because what happens if there's no truth anymore? I mean, what are we working with?
That was really good. Just tell me the intellectual distinction between 3 Pinocchios and 4 Pinocchios, and we're good. Just tell me. Tell me the difference between liar, liar, pants on fire. That's literally their rating, all right? This is a very complex intellectual exercise. It looks like someone putting a thumb on the scale and really, intentionally targeting Republicans, but no, this is a complex intellectual exercise. And you know what, folks? They can keep doing it. It doesn't matter. We're going to win elections despite it. I would welcome a debate on the facts. I agree that that candidates should not get away with just making stuff up. But this pre-existing health care debate, there was some gray area and some nuance to it. The Republicans did repeal the ACA, and they did put in a bill that wasn't the same on pre-existing conditions, but it did have protection. All right, and in their minds, they had a better protection system. Although in the other side's mind, they put people at risk again for the very thing they said they were protecting them. I get that. We can have that discussion. That's not what we get when the I don't know what they email you, but the PolitiFact people email us, and it is just, I mean, I've just had it, so just thought I'd share. Thanks.
All right. So, quick question, last one from the audience, and then I'll have a couple closing questions, lightning round, I guess we'll call it. Who came up with the ad about Corey Stewart missing a Prince William County board vote on the opioid crisis remedies and explained he was in Alabama to campaign for Judge Roy Moore for Senate? Who
Team
came up
Kane.
with that? Huh?
Team Kane. That was in the research.
That was your,
Yep.
okay. That was the answer. Okay. So, very good. So let's look ahead, 2019 and 2020. Predictions.
Well, I've said in 2019, I think Virginia, the Republicans will expand their majority in the House of Delegates. I do. I think that there was some things that happened in 2017 that are going to be quickly reversed. It's going to be very narrow. They could have different maps that, a court-ordered set of maps would make it tighter. In that case, I think they just hold the majority. The Senate is, tough. And I think that the lower turnout will stay lower, and people will see it as a localized race, and we'll hold on to the Senate. There's going to be a ridiculous amount of money spent one way or the other. 2020, Trump's, their team, their answer to what's happened in last week is, essentially more cowbell. We need more of what we're doing because there's a group of voters that are never coming to them, and the path is through the Rust Belt, and they have got to get their voters out. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but I would not count it out. And a lot of it's going to depend on who the Democrats nominate and how that plays out, what happens with Mueller. I think Mueller's a great individual, top-of-the-line prosecutor. I don't think it's a hoax, and I don't think it's a witch hunt. But he better bring something real if he's going to actually accuse the president of something. And it can't be obstruction of justice on national television in an interview with Lester Holt. Americans are not, that might be enough to get a criminal conviction when he leaves office in the federal criminal system, but that's not enough, I don't think, in the minds of Americans if that's all they got. So it better be big, and I don't know if it is or not. So a lot of big things happening here between now and then, and I think Corinne should tell you who's going to win the Democratic nomination.
in 2020?
How?
Let's start
really
with 19.
Yes.
I do think Democrats in Virginia are fired up, and they have a formula. They have a lot of wins under their belt, and they want more. So it is going to be, it's game on for 2019.
Turnouts, though, are always challenging, right? In these
Turnout is going to
elections.
be challenging, but again, my advice to all the Democrats running next year, focus on your strategy, make it about Virginia and increase your turnout. That's the formula.
But
That's
the
the key in the
Republicans tend to
messaging.
do a better job in the off-off year elections, right? When the
Not
turnouts
this-
are down.
not this off year.
Not last year, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
But I think we have a formula now, and I think and there is evidence already of what the Northam administration is delivering, along with the General Assembly, the Democrats in General Assembly, and using that and saying, hey, we could do more if we have the majority, is going to be important to Dems. So I do think they'll get that.
So on the 2020 Democratic nomination question, right? Because it
2020.
matters. It matters. So just without naming names, I'm having lunch with some past Republican elected officials after the election, right? And very critical of Mr. Trump, right? Look what happened to the party, and I like the stuff on taxes and deregulation and this, but the attacks on the institution, all of that is much bigger than all this other stuff, And then someone asks about, well, what if the nominee is Elizabeth Warren? What do you do? And they kind of looked at each other, right? I'm serious. It's like, they were trashing Trump and saying, this guy's a step too far. I can't do this. you know, and these are pretty conservative folks, but, you know, they've kind of had it with Trump, and they see it as very destructive to the party. But then when somebody on the table throws Elizabeth Warren, all of a sudden, what do I do?
Yeah.
Is that a, you know, and we're going to have, you know, 12, 14, 15, however many Democrats running for nomination. Yeah. And you know how this works, right? When, you know, look at Mr. Trump, 1/3 of the vote, but he picks up all the delegates in a 16-candidate field. You know, you could end up with somebody who's got the real committed core of the party, you know, pulling through the primaries, just as happened with the Republicans.
I'm going to repeat something that Mrs. Michelle Obama said the other day. And it's that, look, we have a process. If, you know, anybody and everybody who thinks they are willing and able and have a vision for America should put themselves out there and should sell it. I think we have a process. That's why we have a primary. And I trust the Democratic voters to really send forth the best person to win and to take the country in the direction that, you know, we think the country needs to go in. So I really trust the process, and I encourage everyone and anyone, anyone. Let's do this. Let's run and win. Put your ideas out there, and I believe in our democratic process.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, do you have a closing statement?
I think I've said enough to ruin my career and lose most of my clients. I'll quit when I'm ahead.
No, I just look. I want to thank everybody, particularly Chris. We had a great conversation even before this, and I do think that's really important. It's important. I mean, we hit it off just automatically, and it's important. We are from different parties. We fight for our side. We fight for our principles. We will always do that. But now I feel like we could also have dinner and enjoy each other's company.
I think you should buy since we lost.
Well,
so thank you.
So on election day, there's polling station in Merton Hall at George Mason University, and there's a red table outside and a blue table outside. And there's a group of students, the college Republicans and the college Democrats, and they're like, 20 feet away from each other. And I go and I'm talking to both of them and thanking them, both sides for being involved in the process. And then I turned and I said, "You all know each other?" "Oh yeah, we're friends. Yeah, So I said, "Oh, let's have a picture together." And so there they were, arms around each other, the college Democrats, college Republicans, with the red and the blue in the foreground. And that was my picture, tweeted out saying, "That's the way it should be," right? I mean, it was election day, emotions are high and everything, but the youngsters are saying there's something bigger than that, which is, each other. So anyway, very good. Thank you. This has been great. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really good. Chris, thank you. Yes.
Enjoyed it.
So.
Went to 9 o'clock.